Hello YouTube, this is DVD Review Studios here, and today I'm going to be doing a Blu-ray and DVD update for November 2020. So let us of course begin with the Blu-rays. First up we have the Mad Max Trilogy Collection, which is the first three original Mel Gibson Mad Max movies. I've wanted to watch these for a very long time, and after watching Fury Road, a friend of mine said that these movies were definitely worth checking out, so I've finally bitten the bullet and gotten hold of them, and this particular edition is a very sleek design actually. It's a sort of tin edition replicating the style of a gas canister from the wasteland, I guess you could say. And this was preferable to me since it was a much thinner edition compared to the box set style where it had three individual Blu-ray cases for all three of the movies. So this was my personal preference on that note, and as of the time of recording this video, I've only seen two out of the three of these movies. I'm still yet to watch the third film, Beyond Thunderdome. But I've actually done a video called Watch and React of the Mad Max films, where over the course of a couple of days I've documented myself watching these films. So that'll be a video upcoming on the channel in the next couple of weeks, but this was definitely a great box set design, and here is the inside Blu-ray case there with the collection here included. So we have Mad Max, which I thought was an okay movie, The Road Warrior, which I thought was absolutely fantastic and is definitely my new favourite Mad Max film, even against that of Fury Road, and of course Beyond Thunderdome, which I'm still yet to watch, but I'm looking forward to doing so. I've heard mixed things about it, so I'm hoping it won't be too bad, but you never know, I guess. And here are the discs there on the inside. Next up we have both of John Carpenter's Escape From films. We have Escape from New York and the somewhat unpopular sequel Escape from LA, which Escape from New York is a film that I've wanted to watch for a number of years, and I'm glad that I did eventually pick this up on Blu-ray. It's not my favourite Carpenter film, but I'm glad I did grab this simply for the iconic character of Snake Plissken, portrayed by Kurt Russell, who really does carry this film and made it very enjoyable with how enigmatic the character was, along with what I quite enjoyed about his character with a lot of the somewhat forced comedic dialogue, such as, "Oh, Snake Plissken, I thought you were dead." That kind of thing was kind of unexpected for this film with how repetitive it was. But the story as a whole was actually very enjoyable, with Snake being somewhat blackmailed into a search and rescue mission within this dystopian style sort of what if future of New York being turned into a prison island. And so he is given 24 hours to do a search and rescue on the US president, who actually crash lands in a plane within the confines of the New York prison island. And so Snake is sent in there to retrieve him and get him back. And overall the story, it was quite exciting, quite the thrill ride with some very unique side characters. I really enjoyed the character that Isaac Hayes portrayed of the Duke, who's kind of the main sort of villain, although I did find him to be incredibly underused, apart from maybe the final couple of scenes which were incredibly satisfying. But overall, Escape from New York, it's a film I would recommend. Like I said, not my favourite Carpenter film, but definitely one that I will be revisiting in the not too distant future. So that is Escape from New York. And of course we have next up Escape from LA, which is the Australian Blu-ray release. I don't think this ever got a Blu-ray release over here in the UK. But for a sequel, it's okay. I've certainly seen worser films. It's just a really goofy sequel in comparison to the serious and thrill ride tone of the original film. This movie just seems to be somewhat parodying itself, surprisingly, since it hasn't aged well at all. The CGI is absolutely god-awful, and it just seems to be somewhat rinse and repeat of a lot of the themes that made Escape from New York so good, with this sort of replicating those but toning it down and just making it seem less relevant to the character of Snake Plissken, who is once again hired to do a job, where this film is set in a what-if style 2013, where he is sent to retrieve a doomsday device from the ruins of LA, and if he doesn't, he will die. So it's that kind of theme. Once again, it was an okay movie though. I somewhat enjoyed it for what it was. Steve Buscemi played quite a funny side character in this. But otherwise, it's a decently coherent film, surprisingly. It just seems to be very repetitive of what made the first film so good, and I think that's why a lot of people do despise this as a sequel. But I found it to be okay, and I will be keeping this in the collection for a little bit longer at the very least anyway, so that is Escape from LA. And last up for the Blu-rays, we have the original Westworld movie from the early 70s, which I sadly haven't watched as of yet. I literally got this only a couple of days ago, so I will likely end up featuring this in an upcoming update video once I have watched it. But it's something I'm really looking forward to checking out to compare it to the HBO series, which I am a big fan of. I've not seen season 3 of this show as of yet. But it's something that I'll likely just grab for Christmas or something like that to binge over the holidays. But the original Westworld I've heard very, very good things about, and for a sci-fi film, this is one that I've had on my hit list forever, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this compares to the television series. So that is the original Westworld movie. So let's move on to the DVDs.
Father James, or whatever he's called.
Can we find out his name?
Moving on to the DVDs, first up we have a film that was recommended to me by my good friend at the Cryptic Cinema, aka Dean, and that is Event Horizon, which was quite the thrill ride and a great blend of both horror and sci-fi connotations. Set in the year 2047, where Dr. Weir, portrayed by Sam Neill, is investigating the bizarre disappearance of the spacecraft known as the Event Horizon. And so 7 years go by with this spacecraft being enigmatically missing, where it randomly pops back up on the radar, and so Dr. Weir launches a investigatory mission, or a search and rescue, to try and find out what happened to the ship and what happened to the crew. And as they travel to find out, they learn quite a horrible truth, where the entire ship, including its crew, was possessed by pure evil, as a result of the way the ship actually travels across mass distances, where using black hole technology it dips through one black hole through another on the other side, but as it passes through, it ended up in an alternative dimension made of pure evil, or hell as they kept terming it throughout the film. And that's where the horror stuff comes in, which seemed to be very heavily inspired by Hellraiser. At least that's what I read upon the IMDb page, but overall it was an okay film. It's probably something that I would only give the one watch and wouldn't necessarily recommend unless you're a big fan of horror or sci-fi. But it was really well acted, had some really great gore effects, and Lawrence Fishburne portrayed a really great heroic character. And this particular DVD edition is kind of interesting. It's this sort of limited edition box set design from what I can see, and it actually has a little sort of serial number on the side stating it's a collector's edition, or at least a limited edition, I guess you could say. Whether or not that actually means anything, I don't really know, but anyway, that's Event Horizon. Definitely a unique film to say the least. Next up we have Kingsman: The Golden Circle, a sequel that I was somewhat avoiding and trying to hold off of, since I hold the original Kingsman movie in such high regard. And from some of the mixed reviews I'd read on this film, I wasn't really prepared to taint the franchise as it would be, and eventually I did end up biting the bullet, of course. And I'm somewhat glad that I did. Thankfully this film hasn't ruined the franchise. I just think some elements of it were incredibly weak. But to my surprise, the elements that I thought were going to be weak, such as the Americanized influences, such as the statesman allied group of spies set obviously in America, and the American villain in Julianne Moore's character, who is hell-bent on basically executing mass world extinction to a degree using drugs. It was overall a mixed bag in terms of the plot points, but I like Julianne Moore's character as a villain. It was kind of surprising to see her in that role, and I really enjoyed her role for that particular reason. She had quite the dark, twisted humour as a villainous character, to my surprise as well. Elton John making a cameo appearance here and there was absolutely hilarious, and the CGI used, especially with the robo-canines, they were definitely quite fearsome. And this made for overall an okay movie. I was only let down really by how they brought back Harry and the sequences that were trying to replicate some of the key scenes and iconic moments from the original film where things didn't quite go to plan. And those moments just seem to kind of cheapen the original. I get what they're going for to show that Harry isn't quite the man he used to be in his revival in this film, but other than that, I thought it was okay, and it didn't taint the franchise as I'd thought it would, so I would recommend it if you are a fan of the original Kingsman film. Overall, it was okay. Next up we have Oh Lucky Man, a film directed by Lindsay Anderson starring Malcolm McDowell. which this is a film that I have wanted in the collection for quite a while, and I actually struggled to get a DVD copy of this, which I believe this DVD set is funnily enough out of print, and I guess that would explain why the eBay prices have skyrocketed for this, going between £20, £30, maybe even more than that. But I got lucky, or at least I hope I did. I grabbed this over Amazon for a third-party seller for only £12 something, which seemed like a good deal at the time, but I'm not convinced as to whether or not this is a legitimate copy. I think it may in fact be a bootleg. It just doesn't really seem right, if that makes sense, but I guess if there are any discrepancies, I can always claim my money back if so, I guess we'll see as to whether or not this is legit or not. And I picked this up since I recently rewatched the movie If, which is another Lindsay Anderson movie, which I think was, funnily enough, the acting debut for Malcolm McDowell. And this is an absolutely fantastic film, a great drama set in a boarding school, which is very repressive, and so some of the students actually revolt by the end, which ends in a mass school shooting, which was an absolutely crazy sequence. And this is a film I would 100% recommend and was overall very enjoyable. But the character in this film of Mick Travis, portrayed by McDowell, was a character that seemed to continue on in a couple of Anderson's other movies, this being one of them. And I think this has been now somewhat deemed or made into a kind of unofficial trilogy with another film that I'm not overly familiar with, called Britannia Hospital, so I'll likely have to grab that at some point as well, if I do enjoy this movie, which I'm hoping I will. So I'll likely feature this in another upcoming update video once I have watched it. But If is a great movie that I would 100% recommend checking out. Next up we have Keeping the Faith, which was both directed by and stars, of course, Edward Norton. And this is a film that I actually skipped over going through Ed Norton's filmography, but I'm kind of glad that I did purchase this in the end. It was surprisingly quite a funny romantic comedy where a priest and a rabbi end up in a love triangle with a woman that they used to know from their childhood that is reintroduced into their lives and becomes quite a close friend with both of them. And this was genuinely quite a funny comedy that really got quite a few laughs out of me, which I was very surprised about, and was genuinely a very enjoyable watch, even though it was very cliched in some instances. I think the directing style from Ed Norton definitely made this a heck of a lot better than what it could have been, and that's through great subtle visual comedy and some great narration and internal monologue, which Ed Norton really seems to have as kind of an acting trope of his. So overall, I was very impressed with this and very much enjoyed it. So that is Keeping the Faith. Next up is Jojo Rabbit, a film directed and written by Taika Waititi. And this was a film that I was more so intrigued by since Stephen Merchant had a lot of involvement with this film. And this was genuinely another surprising comedy, which really did take me by surprise with its execution for a serious topic such as obviously the Holocaust and the Second World War, with this being a very satirical approach on Hitler Youth, brown shirts in general, and the indoctrination of young boys into Hitler Youth camps. And this was genuinely a hilarious story of a young boy with a twisted mind who actually has an imaginary Adolf Hitler as sort of like a best friend, where he discovers that his mother is actually harboring a Jewish girl within the walls of his home. And he is so freaked out by this and has so many bizarre ideologies that are obviously fictions that are spread throughout Hitler Youth about what the Jewish people were actually like, only for obviously none of this to be true as he slowly gets to know the girl and realizes sort of the error of his ways. Kind of cliched in those instances, but this film was not shy of visual comedy, and the end shots featuring Hitler was absolutely hilarious, where he's sort of begging for him to be believed in once again, asking if he can have a little Heil. Absolutely fantastic, and Stephen Merchant was definitely a scene stealer throughout this film. So overall, very enjoyable. Jojo Rabbit was a great surprise, and I would definitely recommend checking this movie out. Next up is the complete season 1 of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which I have 100% been sleeping on this show. I have not laughed so much in such a long time, and even though this was a very short season of only 7 episodes, I was very surprised really at how much content there was for a first season. I binged watched this in one evening and was very disappointed that there wasn't more, and as soon as I finished this I looked on eBay to try and grab season 2, and I was really pissed off to find out that season 2 is actually in a bundle with season 1, so yeah, I literally had to buy both of them together to obviously get season 2. as a DVD set, which is kind of disappointing since I feel like I've wasted my money now on just grabbing season 1 singularly. But as far as the season goes, it was overall a very enjoyable first season. There's some great episodes on here. When your show begins with episode 1, the gang gets racist, you definitely know you've got an absurdist kind of comedy on your hands. And the character of Charlie was definitely a permanent hook into wanting to watch more of this, with episodes such as Charlie wants an abortion, Charlie has cancer, his moments in Gun Fever were hilarious, Charlie got molested. Overall, an unbelievable character. But yeah, I've definitely been sleeping on this show. I wish I'd checked this out a heck of a lot sooner, but I guess I've got a lot of catching up to do, so you'll likely see more DVDs of this show featuring in upcoming update videos. So that is season 1 of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Next up, we have a couple of documentaries, beginning with Walking with Monsters, Life Before Dinosaurs, which was another entry into the Walking With franchise, I guess you could term it as, which was a series conceived by Tim Haynes in the late 90s, which was overall fascinating sort of CGI dinosaur documentary series, which began obviously looking at dinosaurs. And there's also a follow-up series called Walking with Beasts, which I found to be just as, if not even more fascinating, giving sort of light to these animals that weren't necessarily prominently featured in documentary-style media. And I got all these promo DVDs out of an old box of films and sort of David Attenborough and National Geographic stuff, which I did a video of just looking through on the channel. But these were ones that I really wanted to rewatch, which I did over the course of a couple of weeks. And then I found out that there was a prequel sort of mini-series. This one is only 3 episodes long, which was kind of disappointing, but the content was fantastic, and compared to the other two, the execution of this series is very different, where we actually have on-screen statistics comparing the world then to the world now, looking sort of through the Triassic period as an example, and sort of oxygen levels and stuff like that, which was overall very fascinating. Definitely some interesting stuff, and Walking with Monsters was overall a great kind of sort of prequel, which I very much enjoyed, and I'd recommend checking out the full series of the Walking With franchise. So that is Walking with Monsters. And then we also have a collective DVD, which I think is from the Netherlands, called Walking with Dinosaurs, The Specials, which didn't release over here in the UK, or at least I think 2 of these, the Giant Claw and Land of the Giants, released over here, but there was also a 3-part miniseries called Sea Monsters, which did not release over here. So this was a fairly inexpensive way to grab a couple of the specials along with Sea Monsters as a bonus. And I very much enjoyed this. It was an interesting take on the Walking With style, with Nigel Marven actually being there in person in the documentary with the CGI dinosaurs. And that definitely added for a lot of more sort of comedic moments, and was overall still fascinating as ever. And definitely a great, enjoyable watch. So if you're a fan of the Walking With series, then the specials may be worth checking out. I think there's a couple more as well, which I'll be looking to pick up in the near future. So that's the Walking with Dinosaurs, the specials. Couple of comedies. First up, we have Brass Eye, the series and the special, which is a Channel 4 miniseries following on from the original The Day Today. And this is basically another satirical look at both the news in general as well as satirical kind of celebrity gossip as well. And this really was genuinely quite an eye-opening comedy created again by Chris Morris. And I've recently been watching a lot of Chris Morris's stuff, and this genuinely was one that I'm glad I did not miss out on. Absolutely fantastic miniseries, 6 episodes in total, and then a 2001 special, which they've neglected to title, which was known as Pedogeddon. And that was arguably one of the most controversial moments, I believe, for Channel 4, where after the episode aired, they actually had to release a full public apology for what they had actually aired, and Chris Morris really did get quite the slap on the wrist, as it would be. But this genuinely was fascinating to watch, and I would 100% recommend checking it out. Some great British comedy, very inexplicable, and the Pedogeddon special in particular. I think you can actually watch the full thing of that on YouTube. It's very bad quality, but this genuinely was absolutely hilarious, and I definitely recommend checking it out. So that is Brass Eye. And we have another British comedy that aired on Channel 4, and that is Nathan Barley, which is a 6-episode long miniseries. And to be honest, I'm kind of surprised that this show didn't really take off. It wasn't really anything special. Christopher Morris had a hand in, I believe, writing this show. And overall, it just seems more, if anything, culturally relevant now than it did back in 2005 when this originally aired. And I say that because this show is almost like asking Professor Farnsworth's or What If Machine as to how the world of today with social media and social media platforms, how would the world of today and the self-made celebrity cope in a world like this where you would actually have to create your own platform? And that is what Nathan Barley does. He creates his own website called trashbat.cock.
Check it out, yeah? Trashbat.cock, my website.
Where he uploads his own comedy, prank videos and stuff like that. And in person he advertises it like an absolute arsehole. And the comedy comes from a fly-on-the-wall kind of perspective, looking at the sheep of then, the people that just follow blindly, following someone like Nathan Barley, who are absolute idiots. And we see this from the perspective of journalist Dan Ashcroft, who is looking on in awe as to how people are just so blindly following someone like Barley. The way the show progresses, it's genuinely quite interesting, and Dan Ashcroft as a character was absolutely fantastically written. And for such a short series, this was very well executed and overall very enjoyable. And this DVD set is very unique with this inside artwork, where we have the disc there on one side, and this extra inclusion on the other side with some relevant imagery and ideas provoked within the show. So I'll just give a quick flick through there anyhow. And as far as the show goes, I'd recommend it as a one-time watch kind of thing, maybe. It wasn't the best thing in the world, like I said, but maybe worth checking out if you are interested in obscure British comedy. Next up, we have a couple of movies sent over by my good friend Tim, aka Dr. Rat, which you'll likely see him scurrying around in the comments adding random factoids to my videos, so definitely keep an eye out for Dr. Rat. But as a gag, as a joke, he sent over some movies that he knows I probably either will never watch or will just absolutely hate either way. So we have a double feature pack of Ghoulies and Ghoulies 2, a B-movie Samurai Zombie, Stay Alive, which looks to be a fairly generic horror movie, and then the movie out of all of these that I did actually watch, and that was Demons in My Head, which I was very misled by the front cover, since it did look okay, and these sort of best music and special effects win a best picture kind of thing. Oh boy, definitely not true. This was absolutely god-awful, and I want an hour and a half of my life back after tuning in for this. This was a very strange, I guess, horror movie with sci-fi connotations, where a lonely man called Travis discovers a crashed meteor in his back garden that has a headset in there that can actually be used to bring matter from an alternative universe into the existing universe. And he tries to replicate certain things like money and tries to use it to his advantage, which doesn't quite work. And there are negative consequences for trying to use the headset. And that's me trying to explain the plot coherently. I could have done without the strange sort of Mexican kind of demon character that was in this film. I'm back for seconds! Some really weird, odd gore effects and stuff like that. It really was honestly one of the worst films I've ever seen. And yeah, I'll likely be either throwing this in a skip or just burying it somewhere and hiding it so that I never have to ever worry about ever accidentally watching this again. So thanks, Tim. Next up, we have the first 4 seasons of Wentworth, or Wentworth Prison as it's known here in the UK, which this is a show that my partner actually got me into. She introduced me to the show and I watched the first couple of episodes and just ended up buying the DVD sets to binge watch these as comfortably as possible, since streaming the show wasn't the easiest. So the DVD sets weren't overly expensive, so I grabbed season 1, which I watched within literally a couple of days. It was only 10 episodes long, which got me to season 2, and then I bought season 3 and season 4 fairly cheap over eBay, and they were much cheaper to get the Australian releases than actually get the UK versions, so I'm glad I picked those up to save a little bit of money there. But Wentworth Prison is a fantastic show. It's set in Australia, where B. Smith is a new inmate in the Wentworth Correctional Institute, where B is guilty of attempted murder, having tried to kill her husband, who is guilty of physically abusing Bee and harming their daughter as well, which some of those scenes were really uncomfortable to watch, that's for certain. But we follow Bee as she is introduced into the Wentworth prison, and we see her trying to survive up against the top dog, Jax, who is honestly one of the most intriguing kind of villainous characters. And then we also have characters such as Frankie Doyle, who genuinely becomes one of my favorites over the course of the series. But season 1, it was only 10 episodes long, fairly short, and had quite a conclusive end, which extends Bee's sentence, which leads us into series 2, which was overall quite heartbreaking in some areas due to what happens to Bee over the course of the show. But this seems to really introduce more of an ensemble kind of cast, which seems to be where the show as a final kind of direction goes over the remainder of the series. And this had one of the absolute best fight sequences between both Bee and Frankie, trying to basically challenge one another for the position of top dog following the events of the first season. And that fight scene was very bloody, very well thought out, and the setup and premise leading up to that particular fight in one of the latter episodes, kind of leading into an almost prison escape as well, was genuinely fascinating, and some great story building and writing. And that leads us into season 3, where we have the character of Joan Ferguson being heavily portrayed as now the main villain, which is hinted at throughout the majority of season 2, but now as the governor of the prison, she is a force not necessarily to be reckoned with, and the characters in the prison learn that the hard way, and that's really what the meat of this season is in particular. Leading into season 4, where the ultimate twist is that Joan Ferguson ends up becoming an inmate, where the governor actually falls from being the governor to now just one of them. And the way this season ended was incredibly unexpected. I definitely will not spoil it, but it's changed the direction of the show, and is something that I'm kind of just going to have to get used to, I guess, going forward. So that was the first 4 seasons of Wentworth. I believe there's going to be 9 seasons in total, and I think season 8, part 1, as they're calling it, has only just come out on DVD as of late, so I've got a lot of catching up to do, but I'm very much enjoying the show, so definitely a series I would recommend checking out. And finally, to wrap up this update video, we have the remaining seasons of King of the Hill, which I needed to complete my collection. So if you want to see the other seasons that aren't featured in this update video, you can check out my previous one to see the seasons there if you are interested. And I've also reviewed season 1 in its fullest, which I do intend to review all these seasons whenever I can. So beginning first of all with season 7, I got very lucky with this DVD. This one is seemingly the rarest one. This one, along with season 6, especially in the UK, are very difficult to get hold of and actually very expensive on the secondary market. And it seemed to be going for around 20 up to about £40 over eBay, which is insane. But I got very lucky with this. An eBay seller listed a couple of seasons of the show, including this one, around £4 each, and this was listed on eBay as just good condition with a blank description. And I took a gamble on it, because with good condition, that could mean scratched discs, it could mean vomit all over the DVD set, who knows. But it paid off. I've watched this in the fullest, the discs all played fine, arrived clean in pristine condition, so I took a chance, and I'm definitely glad that I did. That chance definitely did pay off there, so I'm very happy to have gotten that for such a good deal. We skip over a season to season 9. Season 8 is in my previous update if you wanted to see the cover design for that one. But here is season 9, a bit of a shorter season this time round. Season 10. Season 11, Season 12, and the 13th and final season, which I'll be very sad to see this show go once I have finished it. And I got very lucky with these remaining season box sets, since I grabbed them all from the same seller, who actually let them all go for only £30, which I was very happy with, so definitely a great bargain to wrap off this update video. So that's going to do it for my Blu-ray and DVD update for November 2020. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave me a like down below. Let me know in the comments, have you seen any of the titles that I have featured in this video? And for more, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.
Are you threatening me?